Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here, as always, with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, how you doing, mate?
I'm not bad, mate. Not bad. How are you?
Uh, do you know what? I'm probably better than a lot of Villa fans may think. Depending on when you're listening to this, probably 2 hours ago now, I was speaking to Danny and Cole from the Holte cast about the game. So if you want to hear some more thoughts on that, by all means, check that out. I'll probably link it. Or if this is out before theirs, I'll tweet about it. So if you don't follow me and Dan on Twitter, Dan is at Wiseman Football. I am at Dan Morgie 34. So get some more, just some plugs in at the start of the podcast. We've not got many anecdotal stories to
No,
begin
nothing
with in
today.
terms of Barry Bannon, but it's great to see a few people in the comments. Dan had also had a similar experience with Bazza that you had. So I mean, that's always
Yeah,
great to
well,
hear.
but it's nice to see that this has become the Barry Bannon appreciation show.
It
Yeah,
has to
so
when
have
Wes
I.
isn't here.
Although with news that we got obviously the other day from Boris, I won't be serving Barry or anyone else for some time. But what that does mean, I think, is good to say this at the top of the podcast, Dan, is that it frees up my time. I imagine it's freed up a lot of your time as well. And I know it's not going to be particularly a great month for a lot of people, least of all ourselves included, mate. And I really enjoy coming on and recording this with you. It's great to see that we're seeing increasing numbers of people coming on and enjoying listening to this as well. So I thought we just head up the podcast with a bit of positivity before we get into the game, and just say that I'm happy to keep the coming thick and fast with yourself, mate. You know, I think it'd be really nice if we could make people's day and stuff like that. But and just even if it's people tune in for the half an hour, whatever it is that the length of the episode, and just try and inject a bit of positivity. So yeah, I'm happy to, mate. I've got plenty of free time on my hands. So yeah, let's use this lockdown productively, and yeah, let's keep it going.
Absolutely. And listen, as you can probably see, it's a bit dark. Dan and I have kind of sat on this game for a little while. We were the early kickoff on pay per view, which is something we'll get to probably towards the end of the podcast in terms of pay per view. But obviously, I think one thing that we always try and make sure the podcast is that it's genuine. And I've had time to think about this. And listen, if I'd have come on this podcast straight away, Dan, we would have probably been, all guns blazing, just raging at the fact we conceded 4 goals. It would have been 30 minutes of screaming, which isn't productive for anyone. Now, we're not positivity for positivity's sake. I genuinely do think there are things that we can take from this game into our next game against Arsenal. But it has to be said, going 4-0 down in the manner that we did is an absolute disgrace. And I do not expect that to happen again anytime soon after the humbling from Leeds. And if there are any of you Leeds United fans watching, thank you for all the views recently and all the comments. Been very engaging with our podcast, so we do appreciate that. But listen, we rightfully lost to Leeds, and one loss doesn't define a season, a team. It's 90 minutes of football taken in isolation, and we deserve to lose that game. Now, obviously, from Villa, you expect a response. Now, I think we said in another podcast, Dan, about certain games, how they will mark how far Villa have come. Ultimately, this is probably the one, because Villa have obviously they'd made an unbeaten start, Dan, before the Leeds game, 4 wins in a row. We were sitting high up in the table, and uh, as we kind of touched on, tactically outclassed by Leeds. Coming into Southampton, I feel like there was maybe a bit of an air of complacency from the squad. I think they maybe expected a bit of an easier ride, which we alluded to in the preview. Although we were feeling rather optimistic, you can't rule this Southampton team out. I think the last time we played them at Villa Park, they were in the bottom three, and they've not been in it since. It was a real big sort of turnaround in fate for them. And obviously, I mean, you can't go 4-0 down at home to a side, like Southampton. It was always going to be a tough game, Dan. And the first half of football, although we don't want to dwell on it too much, was totally unacceptable.
Yeah, it wasn't great, mate. It was. What's interesting to see is that even in the games which we've won and we've done well in, perhaps excluding the Liverpool game, which I think in every sense of the word was a bit of a footballing anomaly, to say the least. we start slowly. We did it
Yeah.
against Leicester, and we were able to sort of grind that one out and come away with the win. But we the last few games, it's really laborious from Villa, and this has been a problem now. Obviously, it's it's hard to say that we started slowly in games last season, because in some games we never got going at all. But it's very rare that in the past few years you can think of too many instances where Villa have come flying out the traps. And I think in those games whereby it's really nip and tuck, and it's difficult to call a victor, before the game, it's really important that you get a hold of that midfield and you dominate. And I think as the home team, that's expected. Southampton have got a brilliant midfield. There's a lot of running power in there. There's a lot of energy. I really like Oriol Romeu. I think in terms of a player that just goes out and is consistent and does their job on a regular basis, and perhaps doesn't really get the credit that they deserve. He's right up there in the league as one of the more underrated players, because he just keeps that Southampton side ticking. He does the dirty work, and he doesn't get a lot of praise for it. And James Ward-Prowse is going to take all the plaudits for this game, and rightly so. But Oriol Romeu and they just did a fantastic job of dominating that midfield. And the Villa midfield, I think, is where it was lost ultimately. What we saw last season, whereby if the midfield aren't doing their job of protecting that back four, then there are mistakes in it.
Yeah.
And we have changed the personnel and stuff like that. But if any midfield in the world, really, Arsenal, the reason why they've signed Partey is because if you don't have the midfield doing its job, and the way that Southampton were just able to play through us on occasions was so easy. It was like a training ground. Then it does expose the back four to making mistakes, and we made mistakes in the form of giving away fouls. And now look, mate, this is what is frustrating, is because if you're conducting the scouting report on Southampton, you look at them, and the first thing that you notice is, since the start of the 17-18 season, no player has scored more goals from direct free kicks than James Ward-Prowse. So you're telling the Villa boys, look, don't give him those opportunities in and around the 18-yard box. Try not to foul. You'd rather, I know it causes problems with a goal that was ruled out for offside, but you'd rather give away corners and stuff like that, because those deliveries and those direct free kicks from him are so dangerous. And it proved that way, mate. And look, it was an assist and two direct free kicks, the first time that's ever happened in a single half that a player scored two free kicks. And you have it's like, look, I'm not delusional. I was running half asleep apparently, but I was running the admin for the Twitter account for Heart the Holte during the game, and I said it then. It was like, look, we gave him the opportunities, but is there another player in the Premier League that can go and do what James Ward-Prowse did from those three dead balls? I mean, if you're talking like De Bruyne caliber, maybe, but two fantastic goals, mate. Wow, I think it's important that we do put respect on those.
Absolutely, it's a dead cert really from that kind of situation. And people who are listening to the podcast, it's very easy to go, it's if, buts, maybes, but on the balance of play, Villa weren't that poor, I didn't think, in the first half. It was these moments of madness that whether it's a lack of confidence or just potentially being scared of what's happening. But I don't know, in terms of the two free kicks that Ward-Prowse scored, I know I and you would much rather Theo Walcott have had the two shots when the ball's just fallen to him than allowing someone like Ward-Prowse to take these free kicks, because before he steps up, regardless of whether your stream was behind and you already had the updates through BBC or Sky or Google or wherever, but when James Ward-Prowse steps over a free kick in that kind of situation, it's going to end up in a goal. Listen, can't be too mad about that, especially with the fourth goal. Danny Ings, what a finish that was, frustrating. Wow. If I'm being really picky, Target shouldn't have shown him inside, but how many players has the audacity to get a shot off like that, bury it top bins? Really felt sorry for Emi. I felt like he was, unfortunate with all the goals. There were four pretty much unsavable efforts, but Danny Ings deserves all the respect in the world, as does James Ward-Prowse. But Dan, in the second half, it was a revitalised Villa. Obviously, your man Bertrand didn't make it past the 20-minute mark, which it's not looking good for the back of your home shirt, Dan. But listen,
Bro,
Trezeguet, I think there was calls to freshen it up. We both said this in the last podcast, Dan. A lot of people on Twitter, actually, when we ran the poll, said that they would like to see Trez keep his spot. And listen, Trez came on and he did bits, man. Like, he did enough to, warrant his position in that starting 11 without even the injury of Traore. He came on and he did the most, man. Like, 5 shots of Villa's 10 that were were created in the game were from Trezeguet. They were all on target or blocked efforts at that back post, and it's where we've seen him pop up and cause trouble, especially during Project Restart. Even before then, popping up at the back post against Liverpool, Chelsea. We've got to give a shout out to Trez, man, because that play, just switching the ball from left to right, and Trez being able to occupy that space. Obviously, it was he had a few different personnel he faced at left back, with Bertrand going off injured and Diallo coming on to cover there. But listen, Trez, very good game, Dan.
Yeah, as has been the case for the majority of this season, mate. It was interesting that he was the one that was chosen to come out, but I think what we're starting to see is that I don't think Dean necessarily trusts his bench, and perhaps that's a wider issue to get into for another time. But he was only really that, although Trezeguet didn't deserve it, who else? What other change do you make?
Yeah.
Like, do you take, like, because if I like, I'm a fan of a lot of what Conor Hourihane does, but you don't, if you put John McGinn out and put him onto the bench and for Conor Hourihane, I fear starting riots. You can't go and do that. Realistically, the fact he's a new signing, the fact that he plays on that side, choice for Bertrand is the only real choice that you can make in terms of switching it up. And look, I mean, it's nice to know that we can count on Trez to come in and put in these kinds of performances. I think he had a lot to prove coming on. In that, obviously Bertrand has started ahead of him. I think it was up to him to prove to Dean that spot is his. I've said on previous podcasts, he's playing like a man that has tried to be replaced, and that's exactly what it is. He's playing out of his skin at the moment. He looks to be willing every shot towards goal. He seems gutted when, shout out to Alex McCarthy, because he put out some amazing saves.
Absolutely.
And it could have been a very different game. And speaking of different games though, mate, I'm sure a lot of Villa fans will have seen it. I'm sure you've seen it. It'd be rude not to touch on the XG of this game. The expected goals. So for those that don't know, this is, I'm not sure exactly how they're calculated. It's pretty amazing, but it's a sort of computer algorithm that sort of takes into account where the shot is from, all those sorts of things, the power of the shot, everything like that. Villa's 2.67 expected goals in the game. Southampton were 0.8. And look, I think on any other day,
Villa win that game.
Well, exactly, mate. Yeah, we don't concede 4 goals. Danny Ings that's a goal of the month, goal of the season contender, whatever you want to call it. James Ward-Prowse, that's the first time that's ever happened in Premier League history that a player, as I was saying, has scored a goal, 2 free kicks in one half. And look, obviously, I know that like Vestergaard had that goal ruled out for offside, and that was, Southampton fans are going to think that was on. Villa fans are going to think it was off. It was one of those decisions. And obviously, fair and square, he scores a brilliant header. But even then, it's a fantastic header from Vestergaard, and one that you won't see too many better headers this match week. It was a fantastic effort. But Villa, that was a real moment at half time where I think everyone looked at Dean, and it's now like, right, prove your worth now. Like, these are the situations where if we're going to be competing anywhere near the top half of the Premier League, you have to be able to turn this around. You have to be able to, and look, I wasn't expecting a comeback. I just wanted a bit of fight. We just had to go out there and use that Sunday League cliche, just win that second half. And we did, mate. We scored some really good goals. I was pleased with what we saw. I think Tyrone's goal especially was really nicely worked. Jack was on an absolute tear in that second half, considering he was kept pretty quiet by Southampton in the first. And it's a good thing that we had the second half that we did, mate.
Absolutely. And listen, Ty very much needed the goal because he was extremely poor. One thing I noticed, obviously, from being in the press box at Leeds was how commanding he was, and he was, he was constantly telling people where to be, this kind of stuff. He really led by example vocally that day, and I mean, I didn't hear any of that on the pitch on the stream. I mean, there's an argument for the second free kick from Ward-Prowse. Ty has to jump and just take that in the face. He's stood there planted, and the goal goes in. Again, fantastic technique. But if your wall doesn't jump, you got no chance. And the goal came at a good time, obviously for Villa because it got us back in the game. And for Ty, I think he just needed it for confidence. But listen, Jack Grealish, Dan, let me run it down. Jack Grealish made 21 final third passes against Southampton. He suffered 7 fouls, which, shock horror, it's Jack Grealish. That's always going to happen. Managed 6 shots, 2 of which were on target. Obviously, he scored the goal as well. 4 aerials, he won all 4 of them. He created 2 big chances, won a penalty, scored a goal, got an assist. Wow. This man is on a tear, and we're not even, we don't bat an eyelid at it. This is just Jack Grealish. It's what he does best. He leads by example. Even when, he's been nullified in the first half, things aren't looking great for Villa, he's still capable. He's got this I don't have to wax lyrical about how good Jack Grealish is on an Aston Villa podcast because you guys know. But watching this game, again, I said this last week, I didn't even bat an eyelid at what Jack Grealish did. But then when you look at them stats in isolation, I mean, it's phenomenal. In any other player, in any other team with them kind of numbers, it's all over Twitter, it's everywhere, it's whatever. This is standard stuff from Jack Grealish. And yeah, we didn't win the game, but man, what a tear our captain is on.
Yeah, man, it's a pleasure watching him at the moment. It really is, and I hate when people say these things. I really do, but if that goal that he scores, if that's put in by a Kevin De Bruyne, a Lionel Messi, or someone of that ilk, you're gonna know about it.
Yeah,
Nobody in the I was about to say nobody in the stadium, but that's only about 50 people. But nobody watching knew that spot was there. Alex McCarthy had no chance. He didn't know what to do. It was such a great find. And look, our captain is a boy genius, man. He really is. Love watching this guy. And, as you say, it's stupid coming on this podcast and talking about how good Jack is, but you feel almost obliged to, mate, because you don't want to take it for granted because this is the best Aston Villa player I've ever had the privilege of watching in my lifetime. By a long way, and the fact that he's our captain, the fact that he's the Villa lad makes it that little bit better. But look, he's a brilliant player, mate, and such a shame that we can't be in the ground to witness these performances because what he's doing right now is world class. He's doing it in this league and doing it on a game by game basis now, which is what is most remarkable is because last season, he had a great first half of the season. It was exactly like this. Trailed off, fair to say, in the second half of the season. That moment against West Ham was penned in big time because it had been a long wait. I think it was getting us to 7-8 games, but that wasn't it without a goal or an assist for Jack. Before that, and obviously he was saving it for when it mattered most. But we haven't seen any of that this season. Every single game, Jack is bringing his A game, and it's nice to know that even when Southampton found a way and did a very good job of it, might I add, in the first half of nullifying Jack Grealish, he finds a way to make sure that he, as a captain, can influence that second half, shoulder that responsibility of getting Villa back into the game, and do a very, very good job of almost getting us getting us a point from that game ultimately. And look, one thing which won't be in the stats, obviously, mate, and unfortunately, he could have had 2 goals to his name. But what a brilliant gesture it was to hand that penalty over to Ollie Watkins, because it would have been very easy for Jack to step up, bang that in, 2 goals, 1 assist. Hello, Mr. Southgate. But, Ollie needed a goal. I think his performance left a little bit to be desired and has done for a couple of games now, whereby I think he needs to contribute more to an overall game. I said this on Twitter. Brilliant finisher. There's no doubt about that. He as an 18-yard box player, he's brilliant. But we need more than that in this
Yeah,
side in those first half, like we did at Southampton. Like that's all very well and good. And I trust Ali. If the ball comes to him 12 yards out, 15 yards out, I trust him in those situations. But we need him to be able to drop deep, to create, to bring players like Jack into play, and I want to see some more of that from him. I don't think I'm not writing him off or anything
no,
like
of
that,
course.
but I think that's where we won. But look, Jack shouldered that responsibility, and he did that brilliantly, mate. And as I said, it's just a crying shame that we can't be there to watch these performances because it's spellbinding watching him at the moment.
Absolutely, and you led on perfectly there to Ollie Watkins, which is what I wanted us to kind of talk about next. But when you look at what he kind of his overall play, as you say, he's a runner. He's willing to run the channels. He likes to drift out to the left. That's a position that he's occupied before, making the switch into the centre forward. And I think ultimately what we're seeing is still very much a player who is learning his role in the team. He's learning his role in the centre forward position. It's great that he had that season to do that at Brentford last year. Obviously, we're in the big leagues now. This is a different gravy. Ollie Watkins, of course, 4 goals this season, phenomenal. I can't complain too much. I think he's been brilliant. I've been begging for this signing for years. I've wanted Villa to sign Ollie Watkins in the Championship, and here we are now. As you say, there is a bit more to be desired in terms of overall play. I think that just comes with learning the system, just getting his feet firmly on the ground. Because if you're going to look in isolation, 4 goals in like what 6 games, that's brilliant. Like just looking at that, obviously 3 of them came against Liverpool. 1 of them's a penalty. It's big that he got this because the last thing you want is your striker to be going X amount of games without a goal. It does, the world of confidence for you, even if it is a penalty from the set piece. As long as you're hitting the onion bag, that's all that matters. So it was great to have a goal from Watkins, especially as he's pretty much at the moment our only striker, because the fact that Villa went 4-0 down and Keenan Davis still couldn't make his way onto the pitch, I think speaks volumes about what Smith thinks about Keenan and maybe the system. Because I think Villa fans were potentially worried that, we've seen it before. He brings on Davis, he'd bring on Samata maybe last season or something like that, and you go 2 up front. That's not a tactical tweak. That's desperation. Now, obviously, Smith stuck to his guns. Ollie saw out the whole game. Ultimately, didn't get the points in the end, but it was a much improved second half. So it's good to see Ollie getting the goals. And listen, very good second half. Villa 12 months ago, Dan. There's no way they come back from that. There's no way Villa even 8 months ago come back from that. So to score 3 goals, to win the second half, that old cliche, as you say, in Sunday League, it's genuinely massive for Villa. And listen, I think there's a lot of positives that we can take forward into next week. The Arsenal game has not long finished. And listen, I don't think we can read too much into how Arsenal performed against Man United. They seem to be happy to just sit with as many men behind the ball, have someone like Thomas Partey in the midfield, break up that play and take their chances as they come. Obviously, Aubameyang scoring the penalty. I think this game does kind of lend itself to Villa, Dan, because we've seen against Leicester, obviously against Liverpool as well this season. Villa do well against these, I don't want to say top sides, but these sides who you expect to be nearer the top end of the table, whether it's because that expectation isn't necessarily there. I don't know. Obviously, we beat them in the lockdown as well during Project Restart Arsenal. And it's going to be an interesting game at the Emirates, Dan, because, even last season, if you go back to our game near the start of the season at the Emirates, we were arguably deserving of at least a point in that game as well. So it's going to be interesting because Arsenal are certainly one of them top 6, if I say, teams that you look at and hope that you can pick at least a point up against them.
Well, you never know what you're going to get with either side at the moment. I think that's fair to say. Arsenal are, they're so difficult to call. From one week to the next. Obviously, last week they lose 1-0 at home to Leicester. They then go and beat Dundalk 3-0 midweek. It took them 45 minutes to get going in that game. They scored all of those goals in 6 minutes and weren't particularly great. And then they got out of nowhere. They go and beat Man United, who have just beaten PSG at Old Trafford.
Yeah.
They do play before we play them on Sunday. They've got Mulder. at home in the Europa League. So, they're going to be, obviously they'll make plenty of changes for that side. I don't think it will be anywhere near the 11 that we see play us. But look, Villa do turn up in these big games, and it was the case last season. It's been the case in the Premier League for as long as I can remember, mate. We do, when the heat is on, we come out of the kitchen, and that has been the case for a long time. And look, this isn't me saying that I expect us to walk out the Emirates with all 3 points, but we're seeing some crazy results right now in the Premier League, and I think it's largely down to the fact that, and because I don't think, if there are fans in the stadium, we go 4-0 down to Southampton. It is far easier to score 2 free kicks in front of 22 other men on the football pitch than it is in front of 42,500 at Villa Park. Joking aside, it
Absolutely.
is. And when, we don't beat Liverpool, as you painfully said, we don't beat Liverpool 7-2 if there's a packed out Villa Park there. No. Spurs don't win 6-1 at Old Trafford or whatever it was. They don't go win 5-2 against Southampton if there's fans in there. And the problem is that when a team hits a groove without fans in there, it resides on the players and the management to buck that trend and kick the domination of the game. And ultimately, when you've got fans in there, they sort of do that for you. That they provide that extra bit of encouragement and perhaps intimidation that enables those ebbs and flows that we see in normal football matches. We're not getting those this season.
No.
It's in the first half, it was all Southampton one way. In the second half, it was all Villa the other way. And the team that gets the first goal, and that's so important, and it has been for Villa this season, is that when we get the first goal, we're fine. Once we get into our rhythm, Douglas can get on the ball, John McGinn can get on the ball, we can settle into things. If we go 1-0 down at the Emirates, which is very, very possible, especially now Aubameyang's back amongst the goals. I mean, I know it was only a penalty, but, it'd been a little while for him. Aubameyang, if we go 1-0 down at the Emirates, we have to summon that courage earlier than the 60th minute.
Yeah.
Which was our downfall this time. We have to summon that courage imminently. And that's very difficult to do, and it's so hard. But we have to do it, as simple as, because we've now conceded 7 goals in our last 2 games against Leeds and Southampton. Arsenal are a side that could easily go and put another 2-3 past us, and we have to stop that from happening. We have to be able to respond earlier. I think we'll go back to seeing that double pivot and the 4-2-3-1 that Dean has favoured for the majority of the season, sort of lined up with what was like a 4-1-4-1 with Douglas as the deepest midfielder. It didn't seem like Douglas and John were level. And I think we will go back to that 4-2-3-1 and where we saw the best of John McGinn, who was so far off the pace today. And that's ultimately what I want to see. I think that's how we play best. Hopefully the injury to Bertie isn't too bad, because I think he's got a lot to offer. I'm really excited. I think he needs a run of games, and I want to see what he can bring to this side. But we know we can count on Trez. He'll come in, and let's hope that we can continue what we saw in that second half at the Emirates next Sunday.
Absolutely, mate. And listen, it's too far out for me to ask you a score prediction, so I'm sure you'll get that on Twitter. I won't plague you with that after this tonight, Dan. Obviously, we've got to wait on team news and stuff to come out. But I think that's a good note to wrap the podcast up on, Dan. Listen, there's plenty to be positive about as Aston Villa do go to North London to face Arsenal in the Premier League. And as you say, look, they've got a game in Europe midweek. What you make of that? That they've... Arsenal, they're a tough one to kind of to predict, because I think one week Arteta's a genius, the next week he's not. If you're judging by what the fans are saying and some of the performances, I like a lot of what he's got going. He's obviously nurtured by Pep Guardiola, who is arguably the best manager in the world, or at least the second best. So listen, it's going to be a tough game. If you guys did enjoy this podcast, please do hit a like and comment your thoughts below on the game. Have you got any other positives that you can take from this game? We'd be interested to hear, and also let us know your predictions for our game against Arsenal. We would love to hear. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. About 70% of you guys who do watch the podcast aren't subscribed. So it would be great if you guys enjoy what you're seeing and hearing, if you'd subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, whatever your preferred podcast listening app is, please do leave a review for us on that, as that does genuinely help as well. So yeah, as Dan just turned his light off there, it's definitely time for us to go. So like, comment, subscribe, and up the Villa.
Chest is essential to fulfilling this got potential. It's a main man, a hero. He's the main leader of the gang. Chester. 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 He's the main leader of the gang now. Chester.